Hi, Shelly.
Hi, Fraser.
Welcome back to my channel
Thanks for
for
having me.
the format we've always been doing, Suds and Duds, Duds and Suds.
In which we talk about the best and worst books that we read in the
Yes.
month.
Yeah. I believe vaguely they were called something else at one point, but I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was called. So I just had
Okay.
to come up with my own unique format.
Okay, so what are we doing on your channel? The suds or the duds?
The Duds. No suds in this lot.
Yes.
Well, for
Yes.
us anyway. For other people, there could be many suds, you know? I don't
No.
judge the amount of detergent people put in their laundry. Anyway, before I
This
get too
metaphor
silly.
is going off the rails.
Yes.
Yeah.
I made it as usual just to bug you, but didn't think it through. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm going to cede the first one to you as an act
Oh,
of
okay.
contrition.
Well, I'm actually going to go from my least duddy to my
Okay.
most duddy, but I think we share a dud.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I have a few duds, so we'll see.
Okay. All right. Do you have three?
Yeah, I have three, but I mean, like, I had a lot to choose from this one.
Okay. So my first dud was If Not Winter by Sappho,
Mm.
which was translated by Anne Carson. Was that one of your duds?
It did not make the list, but it was certainly available to choose from.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this was a dud for me, partly because Sappho fragments are that they're fragments and you're just reading them bits and pieces that are left. But I also just thought the formatting of the book was pretty atrocious in that there was an introduction as to her approach to the translation, but she actually had more notes about the translation, but you didn't even know they were existed. There was no footnotes or anything to indicate that there was extensive notes in the back of the book talking about really more in detail the translation process that she used down to like the grammar, which I'm kind of nerd and I would have loved to read that along the way so that I could really understand like her approach to language essentially. And for that, it was really difficult to get into a rhythm with the book. And there was times where I just set it aside for days at a time.
Yeah.
Um,
Me,
and
I
but
set it aside even longer than you, I think.
yeah, and it was just eventually it was like, okay, I'm just gonna finish this. Um, so I feel like I could have gotten more out of it, and if I did a reread of that same copy, I would know the notes in the back were there. But since I didn't know that for the majority of the read, I didn't want to start all over and
Well, and you'd have to flip back and forth too, which is annoying.
and no corresponding indicators to tell you which page things are on, so you're really kind of going through it a little bit blindly. It was rough.
Yeah. And there's a lot of white space for those notes in which they could appear. Especially
Yeah,
for
and
some of
so
the words like blank, 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 your mother, blank, blank, soldiers. I'm just like, oh yeah, that was amazing.
yeah,
You got
some
me.
pages some pages had like three words on it, and so yeah, there was ample amount of space to have notes indicating why those words were chosen, how they were chosen. Yeah, it was such a weird publishing thing. It was so weird. I don't know, it's very strange.
Yeah. It was for me because the work became so subjective that I had to project myself onto absolutely everything. It became kind of an interesting exercise that became tiresome. Where I was just like, I mean, it's kind of neat that I'm getting to know more about myself, I guess, by learning what I'm projecting onto the text, but it is a projection, and I'd rather have something self-generated from authorial intent than just
Yeah,
blank spaces where I'm throwing stuff at it. And it could be, especially because I'm not a poet either. So I'm just
yeah.
like,
I
who
had the
knows?
inverse experience.
Mm.
So when there was more to read, when there was more poem, I would like really kind of invest myself in that. and when there was more blank spaces, in which the way the translation worked was that when there was blank spaces that was indicated with a bracket, it means that there was words there, but they're not there anymore because it's a fragment, and time has lost those words. I would just read the words and I wouldn't project myself on it necessarily. So a very weird experience. All right. So can I guess your first flop?
Yes, guess.
Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh, or whatever her last name is.
Moshfegh, yeah.
Moshfegh?
That is true. It is on there. It was quite a dud. And I think even more so because right after it, I read Eileen. And I was like, this is great. Like the contrast did not help Lapvona very much. Where I was
You're like, she has the ability to write. She just didn't show it.
Especially since Eileen, I think, is like her debut. So
or like an earlier work than at least Lapvona.
Yeah, which came out this year. So yeah, clearly she had it. Maybe she lost it. We don't know.
So what did you not like about it?
Kind of what most people have been saying. It's very like meandering and lost. It's about a young lad in medieval times.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's in medieval times at some period. And he has a grudge against his friend and leads him to a cliff and throws a rock at him, and the boy falls and dies. And initially he covers it up, but he's actually not smart enough to cover it up because I think the priest or somebody basically chastises him in such a way as to say like something offhand, like when we keep secrets, we like go to hell or whatever. And then he freaks out and then just immediately tells his father about what he's done. And that's sort of the through line of this, where everybody is quite terrible, especially to the female characters, especially in that case. But the amount of ignorance, it's sort of like when people are like, oh, we haven't really come that far from medieval times or whatever, this would be like, actually people were quite ignorant. And the same systems that we see today with the patriarchy and with religion and all those things were more predominantly known and shown in this setting. But because it's almost like in a Wuthering Heights melodramatic way, this cruelty is such a through line that it becomes numbing, and the actual story, when you concentrate on it, is so meandering and blasé about everything that it feels like there's no real impact ever made. And this constant reiteration of the plot beats with a slight book ending of the character at the beginning to the end just didn't feel very like satisfying or anything. So thankfully it was quite short to consume. And I consumed it on audio with her actually narrating it, which is interesting because Eileen has a different narrator and I would say is much better. But I wouldn't say Ottessa Moshfegh is like a poor narrator. And I could see why she'd want to narrate it with all the context that she's trying to insert into everything. But it was still, yeah, like a very meandering, middling, like at one point it was almost a 3-star, but it ended up being a 2-star read for me. Disappointing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you saved me some time. Not that I wanted to read it because I just had heard enough about it that I didn't want to read it.
Yeah. If I ever rename my channel, I'll just name it The Litmus Test.
Yeah. Did Fraser like it? No. Okay. Yeah. Anyhow, do you want to hear my next?
Yes, I do.
Flop? Okay, my next flop is Every Heart a Doorway.
I guess this might be on that.
By Seanan McGuire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, why did you think it might be on there?
You had a emotional reaction to that book from what I remember and could see when you talked about it on your channel as well.
Yeah, it was okay, so the premise is like there is a school in this world that is supposed to be helping children through their trauma who have essentially gone through a passageway into another world. Now, whether it be like through the looking glass, like Alice, or through the wardrobe, like Narnia, but then the children come back with like this experience and nobody in the real world understands it. That premise was fine and I was enjoying it. And then all of a sudden it turns fantasy, turned murder mystery. And I was just like, I did not see that coming. I had no idea. I ended up reading the back and the flaps afterward to see if there was like any indication that this is actually a murder mystery. Like the thrust of this is a murder mystery. There was no indication of that. And I was just like, this is weird. This is very weird. And it was the murder of a student, so a child. And it just was like, to me, I was like, who reads this and likes it? Like, I just didn't, you know, and I guess that was like, that was my line. I was just like, I don't want to read about this like I couldn't even tell if it was young adult or not, but I was like, if it's young adult, then I kind of get it because it's like writing to its audience. But I was like, it was, for me, slotted as adult. And so I was like, why would any adults want to be reading about children's deaths? Like in a fantasy way. It was weird.
But the cherry on top is they're all traumatized.
Yeah, and then it kind of was like, oh yeah, and then I figured out who the murderer was before it was revealed, which is just bad writing. And yeah, and then it was just like, I don't understand. Yeah. I don't understand this book, and I'm not going to. And I guess there's like 10 books in the series or 8 books in the series, and she just keeps turning them out and people keep buying them, and I'm not here for it. I'm just not here for it. So my foray into fantasy has had a rocky start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Well, yeah. Anyhow, what is your next one?
So I debated, and I'm also going in ascending order of dislike.
To worst. To the worst.
Okay. Yes, to the worst. The next one probably won't surprise you. Acting Class.
Oh yeah, I forgot you read it this month.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Sabrina, and I got that as a gift actually from my brother for Christmas or something, and he was like, this is the only graphic novel that's been nominated for like the Booker or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. And in that book, the style is quite similar, but there's less characters, so it's less confusing because they all look very samey. Basically. Okay. Like it feels like it's, I don't know, done in some computer program where they're just dropping in the same faces and slightly tweaked or something. I don't know. But Sabrina was really impactful despite mine not really caring about the style. And Acting Class ascended to new heights with how much I hated the aesthetic that it cultivated. It made there's so many characters and they all look very similar. It's kind of hard to keep everyone straight. A couple looks exactly the same except they're man and woman. There's a lot of weird uncanny valley strange stuff like that I think it's trying to evoke, but it is about these disparate strangers coming together. They go to an acting class for various reasons. Some are lonely, some are trying to rebuild their relationship as like a couple, to do something like get out of the house and try something else, and various reasons. There's quite a few of them, like 6 to 8 of them or something. And then the instructor, who's the only discernible, very different character type that you can tell. You're like, that's the instructor. I know that much. But he does like a very idiosyncratic, strange class in which he is more or less trying to cultivate people ceding their own autonomy to him as an authority figure instead, in a kind of insidious way, where they play out these very strange scenarios, and it gets more and more surrealistic and odd, which is then never explained, and then it is buttoned up in a very perfunctory left field kind of way that I think will either resonate with people where they're like, oh, you tricked me, you got me kind of deal, or this is not a show your work product, basically. Like it's just sort of like, and because the surrealistic aspects are never explained, it really needled me, where I was just like, okay, but why were they on a fucking boat for 3 hours? Like, how is that even possible? They were literally just crossing like a lake from one end to the other, and it's supposedly they were out there for ages, and then they were found by these other 2 people who were also from the acting class that just happened to come across them. There's a lot of stuff like that happening. And yeah, it was just kind of like, yeah, none of it really worked for me, but I was kind of like, you're a graphic novel and I can read you fast, so I'm going to give this to you. In terms of like, if it was a book, I would probably have just DNF'd it, but I actually did finish it. And then, yeah, the ending just made me even more angry about it. So.
Oh, well, you and I have something in common. I have a graphic novel that made the tippy top of my flops.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. Do you know what it is?
I don't think so.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. My worst book was Olympus. Right.
That makes sense.
By Rachel Smythe. Okay, so this is essentially playing around with the Olympians, the Greek gods and goddesses that existed. And the main premise of the book is that one of the goddesses, the goddess of spring, I forget her name, falls in love with or has like an encounter with Hades. But it's set very much like these are pompous, persnickety, rich assholes, and their life is partying and going to brunches. Which, on the one hand, it did work for like the Greek gods and goddesses, because they're just like they're controlling things and getting into kerfuffles with each other, like in Greek literature and all of that. But what didn't work was that it was just like, I feel like retellings nowadays, there is this sense of feminism, like this strong theme of like reclaiming it, like the feminist story narrative that wasn't there. And so you get these narratives like Circe and Song of Achilles, and it keeps on going, where you have like these really strong female characters that are shown in a different light. And I felt like this was the opposite. It made all the women seem as if they were just guy crazy. They were really mean to each other. The women were not supporting each other. Actually, one of the main conflicts is one goddess is jealous of another goddess, and that she sends people after her to like ruin her life, which is just kind of gross to me. But the cherry on top was that the female bodies were depicted, to me at least, like sex objects. And it was like, I just was like, it's gross. And her storytelling was bad. There was times where I couldn't follow like the dialogue because it's set up poorly. She's not a good artist. She needs color to distinguish between the characters. And for a world like, for the world that could be as vast as like the Greek gods and goddesses, that could just be almost anything and be amazing and gorgeous, she did like basically no world building. So sorry, didn't like it.
0 stars.
I just like kept on thinking, oh, I'm gonna forgive it because we're talking about the ancient Greeks, and they did have this thing about jealousy, and they did have this thing about, men were the object of women's desires. But I'm like, we're in 2022. Like, we could totally she could have taken that and made it so much cooler, so much like feminist forward, so much more like interesting. She could have built a really cool world. She could have drawn her characters differently. Like, not everyone needed to be like super voluptuous. Yeah, it was bad.
But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this last one of mine,
okay.
I don't think you'll be able to guess, because I think I mentioned it to you in passing. But I did say it was like the worst book I've maybe ever read.
I don't remember.
It is Endgame, which is
David Baldacci.
Yeah, Baldacci. Yeah. Who is generally good for a little tickle. Like, he is
for a palate cleanser.
Yeah, like, he's passable at commercial fiction. He's very more like tip of the spear for diversity and representation and stuff like that, while being like very conforming with his plots. Like, it's always like the president is in danger and we got to save it. It's like very Jack Ryan things happening. This series is the last in the series. Will Robie, who's an assassin for the CIA. He's, survived 2 deaths and all this stuff. And he is intersected with, what's her name? Rebecca something. She's like a female assassin. Like they're the same of the 2 coin, and they're both, emotionally inaccessible, yet they like each other, but can't actually verbalize these things, despite being able to kill somebody from 2 miles away and take into account the curvature of the earth as they fire the bullet, and stuff.
Jeez,
like
okay.
this. Yeah.
Wow.
He does a lot of research on those things, so that it's very like hyper specific with guns and how they're actually doing the killing and the choreography of the fights, and that's like his strong suit. But this series in the beginning was charming because it revolved around a teenage girl who needed to be saved, and she was sort of his foil, where she'd just be like, why are you so emotionally inaccessible, you guys? Clearly you guys have a thing. But she's not in the picture for the last 2 books, and this one she's not even referenced. It's like she's just gone, basically. And so without them, they seem very vapid. And it's very like high school, we can't talk to each other about these things. And it's the most melodramatic, stupid, contrived, over the top, bombastic plot that he's ever tried to pull off, basically, where it's just like these wild things. So he like survives the mission, they're very excited to be with one another, and he gets back and she's just gone to Vietnam to do a mission, and she leaves a note and she's just like, you wouldn't understand, Will, bye, kind of deal. And I'm like, you guys have been through so much shit together, like it just doesn't ring true. And then when they are finally put together, because Blue Man, a person who is their operations head, who sends them on the missions before, he's called Blue Man. Nobody knows his real name. He's very, shadow puppet, dance, I'm in the CIA kind of person.
Sure.
He goes missing, though. And it turns out he's not at all competent, as we were led to believe, because he gets involved with these like skinhead organizations, and like the manner in which he is captured and all that kind of is just the most contrived thing. Like it undermines everything we know about the character. And then we have this will they won't they romance thing that doesn't actually work, and then it just continues to spiral with all these different groups and stuff. It's wildly, terribly bad. And the funny thing is I looked at some Goodreads reviews, and even people that are like really on the Baldacci train have been like, yeah, it doesn't seem like even he wrote this book or something to me. Like it's that divergent from it. But the annoying thing is I actually own all of these books too, because I bought them ages ago, and I was all like, ooh, Will Robie, that'll be fun, because it's like recommended as really good commercial fiction with like assassins and Jason Bourne type deal. But then it ends with like it's nothing about it works at all. It's absolutely terrible. I hate reading it by the end. And a terrible ending too. The worst ending. So nothing. It's definitely one of the worst books I have ever read in all my time and ages.
Wow. Okay. Well, on that note, we read these books so you don't have to.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty bad. Not that I was ever really interested in Baldacci, but
fair enough. I was just like, I need some brain candy after whatever I had read that was intensive. And then he gave me, I don't know. Yeah, it's like when you're a kid and you go trick-or-treating and they give you those candy corns or something. And you're like, I'm going to have a good time with this new candy I've never heard of. And you put it in your mouth and it's the worst thing ever. And it doesn't get better. And there's like, aftertaste that's the worst as well. That's the end game. Candy corn crap.
Well, for me, that was Lower Olympus.
No. There you go.
It's terrible. Yeah. All right. Well.
Thank you for coming on to talk.
Thanks. If you want to hear the positives, then you can head over to my channel, which will have positive things to say. there was Ted. So hi.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for having me on your channel.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And I will see you next month. Well, the reverse will happen.
Yeah,
like the
flops will be on my channel.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, the studs. No, the duds will be on my channel. The studs will be in your channel.
Or some other new thing that I've created.
You'll
have to tune in to find out.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye.